Hey guys, Ben Crawshaw here. Want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us for this webinar. We're going to get started in about 4 minutes. Know you're busy. We want to be respectful of your time. Uh, I hope that you can see that in the corner of your screen or down to the right, there's a chat stream where you can type in questions or concerns or comments. So just let us know that you can hear us. You can, everything's working just fine. We want to make sure our technology is good before we get started at 2 o'clock Eastern. So again, thank you for your time. We're going to get started in about 4 minutes, and we appreciate you guys joining us. We'll see you in just a minute. Hey everyone, it's Ben Crawshaw. Want to just jump in again and say thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be a part of our webinar today. We're going to get started in 2 minutes, but I just want to let you know we have a chat stream. We want to make this a conversation, a dialogue, not a monologue. So if you have any questions that you think about, any comments, you just want to let us know where you're from, we would love to interact with you. We have a couple of people who are going to try to answer questions as we go in the chat stream. And then I'm going to have about three moments of time in this webinar where I'm going to, talk through some of the questions that you guys ask. So again, thank you for joining us. Let us know that you can hear everything and it's clear. And we'll get started in about 1 minute to be respectful of your time. Thanks, guys. All right, guys, it's 2 o'clock, so we're going to jump in with today's webinar and get started. Really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules. Like I've already said, I've been in the church space for about 2 decades. So I understand how precious and how valuable time is. And there's always something pulling your schedule or distracting your schedule. You got people, you're in the people business, which is never cut and dry. It's never black and white. There's always stuff you can be doing. You're putting on an event every single week. I don't know if you realize that in the church space. There's not a lot of businesses that put on big events 52 plus times a year. And some of you have multiple services throughout the week. So you're putting on multiple events every week. And that's a big deal. That's a busy job. And there's, again, always someone you could be helping or connecting with. So I know your time is valuable. We're going to be respectful of that. We're going to be here less than an hour. But I want to let you know we have a chat stream. Hopefully you can see it on your computer or tablet where you can type in any questions or any comments. Let us know where you're from. I'm a little bit north of Atlanta, Georgia right now, and it's approximately 90 degrees. So I don't know what the temperature is where you're at, but it's really warming up here, okay? This is like you go outside to check the mailbox and you're sweating. That's what we're dealing with right now. So I don't know what the temperature or the weather is where you are, but hope you're having a great day. And I'm really excited today that we're going to talk about growing your church through volunteers. Now, volunteers may not be the word that you use. You may use kingdom builders or servant leaders, or whatever you say. We're really talking about the idea of people in your church who are not employed. They're not paid by your church, but they are equipped, empowered, recruited. They're trained to be a part of the ministry, the mission and vision that God has for your church. And so we're going to talk about that group of people and the impact it can have on the local church. And again, we have a couple of people in the chat stream who are, answering questions as they can, as fast as they can get to them as you type them in. And I'm going to have a couple of times where I address some questions, as we go. We probably won't be able to get to every question, but if you type it in there, we're going to do the best that we can to answer it either in the chat stream or I'm going to answer it live. And really what this is today, the kind of the focus today is about how to grow a bigger ministry without growing a ministry bigger than you. How to grow, but to grow in a healthy way. How to grow, but not to center it all around you and your personality, you and your skills and your abilities. And a lot of times what happens is when we grow a ministry that's as big as we are, you've seen church leaders, they transition, they take another job, another role, they move, and then that ministry dwindles because it was built around a personality. And you even look at the example that Jesus set forth with the 12 disciples, and he built a system of leadership that outlasted him, and obviously not outlasted him. It was his spirit empowering people. It was his life that was, being breathed into this movement in the early church. But there were leaders in place even after Jesus ascended into heaven, that with his spirit could move into starting what we now consider to be the church, the way, the movement of people who are Jesus followers. And we really want to model that. Jesus washed his disciples' feet. And I think many years later, they realized, okay, what he was showing us was how to be servant leaders, how to not base this around us, but to serve the people around us so that they can serve the people around them. That's discipleship, and that's what we're going to talk about. My name is Ben Crawshaw. I'm Director of Content at The Rocket Company. 2 decades of ministry experience. I started in 1998 working in student camps with no clue what I was doing. I started speaking well before I had any right to be speaking. And I've been in the church space. I've been in a church of 125 people, and I've been in a church that had a staff of 350 people, North Point Community Church at the time I started. So I've been in the big church, been in the small church, and worked with nonprofits, parachurch organizations, and have spent a lot of time with pastors and church leaders. And I love small churches. You may be on this webinar and you're not a small church. That's okay. I love you too, but I'm a fan of the small church. And I think that there's a lot that big churches can learn from small churches, just like there's a lot that small churches can learn from big churches, because you are facing some similar issues, but in different ways. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other. And I'm passionate about helping churches and making a difference. And I'm passionate about church leaders. I understand, the burnout effect. I understand the insecurity, sometimes the just the attack of your schedule, of your heart. And I'm just passionate about leaders and the health of you and your family and your church organization. So that's me. I'm going to be hanging out with you today. And my goal is that really when you walk away, you're equipped with systems and processes to get more buy-in from servant leaders, to get more people who are not just showing up and doing a role and checking it off a list, but they're bought in, they're engaged, they're empowered in the mission and vision of your church. And really what I want is less burnout for you. I want to see church leaders who feel like their heart is protected and they're not pulled dry. The well inside of you is not empty, not only in your professional approach to your job, but also in your personal relationship with God, that you're not operating from a system of burnout and pressure and fatigue, but out of the overflow of your heart that the Spirit of God is moving in you. You don't feel the pressure and the burden that it falls on your shoulders. You're just allowing God to use you as a vessel and equip and empower other leaders around you so that it's not all on your shoulders. And if you stay to the end of this webinar, I'm going to share a secret. I don't know if it's a secret, but I'll call it a secret to getting more out of your volunteers immediately. Not that you're trying to use them to just get more out of them, but really how you can kind of just in one little small way, kind of equip them to kind of be more bought in, more excited, and more motivated around what you're doing. Now, I would say this, is that most volunteer trainings, they neglect one major fact, and it's this, is that most churches need more staff, but they don't have the budget, right? I mean, we would all sit here and say, yeah, I would love more people that I could pay in children's ministry and student ministry, and our Sunday morning worship service team. We need people out at the information table. We just need people who can be here thinking about this throughout the week, people who are just bought in, people who, we can pay them to fulfill all of these duties and responsibilities, not only for the week-to-week things that we do, but also for just this big vision that we want to empower. But we simply don't have the budget. That's the problem that we're looking at. We see all the needs, we see all the big vision we want to accomplish. Then we look at our budget and it doesn't match up. And hey, that's an issue. That's a situation that many people face. And a lot of volunteer trainings don't recognize that. And so I'm going to ask today, what if the answer wasn't hiring more staff? What if the answer was recruiting, training, and empowering more servant leaders?
Hey, Ben, this is the Rocket Company here. Before we move on any further, we're having some trouble seeing the slides. So if you could share those with us again, that would be great.
All right, you got it. Let's see here, guys. I'm going to make sure that I do this. Thank you for jumping in there. Can you see them now?
Yes, we are good to go.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. I'll back up real quick, talk about this. Most churches need more staff. They don't have the budget. What if the answer wasn't hiring more staff? What if it was recruiting, training, and empowering more servant leaders? And you guys jump in and let us know if you're still having any trouble seeing the screen. We'll make sure we take care of that. We're dealing with technology. The beauty of technology is you're all over the place and we get to be together as opposed to flying in and paying money and getting a hotel room. But then also technology, it can sometimes be a hindrance. But we're going to plow through here, and I'm going to talk about the reason why I'm passionate about this is because when I started in ministry, I thought I was supposed to be superhuman. After all, church staff members are expected to do a lot, right? I started in a small church. My title was ministry assistant. I don't even know what that means. Okay. So that was my title. It just meant do everything. And I thought that, hey, that's what church staff and church leaders are supposed to be. They're supposed to be superhumans who do everything. But over time, trying to do everything and put everything on my shoulders and be everything, I discovered first that I had kind of moved from really loving people, which was the reason I got into ministry and caring about people. Instead, I was frustrated at them, and I didn't know why. I was feeling frustrated at people. They all felt like they were just pulling, tugging on my schedule, distracting me from things I needed to get done. Ministry was a pressure, not a passion. So passionate when I started, and then all of a sudden it felt like a pressure, like I dreaded it. I'm like, man, what's the deal here? This feels so different. and vision. I had all this vision, and that was slowly fading to burnout, and no longer being excited and passionate about what was going to happen. I was just, again, focused on the dread and the frustration, and I knew something was wrong. And I learned this the hard way, and hopefully you're going to get to learn this the easy way. See, the hard way says, I need to do more. I need to do it because I'm on staff. I don't have time to train someone else. If I find someone else, they won't do it as good as I can or as good as I want them to. And really, the hard way is saying it's all about me. And we don't do this, on purpose. We don't do this out of, selfishness. It's just simply first the model that we see in front of us, and simply this is what we spend our weeks thinking about. And we're like, most people, they have jobs, they have lives, they have families. They're not thinking about this. I'm on staff. I just need to take care of this. So that's the deal. Here's what I've seen is that the more healthy volunteers you have, the more people you can effectively reach. That essentially, again, Jesus had 12 close disciples around him, and impacted so many more people, even again, as I said, after he ascended, through these 12 people, and they went all over the world, carried the message all over the world. And these were healthy followers. Again, not all 12 of them, 11 of them, and they replaced the 12. But they carried that message all over the world, as opposed to it just being everyone who was in earshot of Jesus and his teaching. And the more people you can effectively reach, the larger you can grow in a healthy way. Churches, hey, they want to grow, but sometimes churches grow in an unhealthy way. It's all built around a personality. They grow fast in their worship service. Their children's ministry isn't ready, or the student ministry isn't ready. You want to grow, but you want to grow in a healthy way, and that comes from healthy volunteers. So today we're talking about the 4 secrets to growing your church through servant leadership, which is the volunteer ministry. And I'll give you an overview real quick. The 4 secrets are vision, you have culture, looking, and training. And we're going to go through these one by one. And again, in just a little bit, we're going to have some Q&A time. So feel free to jump in with any questions that you may have, and we'll address those either live, or we'll address those in the chat stream. Now, vision is really the motivation of the volunteer ministry. A volunteer ministry is what you have. This is why you have it. And you don't want the volunteer ministry to be like a church library. Okay, my first church, there was a church library full of books. Nobody knew it was there. Only a few people used it, but it was just one of the things the church felt like they needed to have. And we can do that sometimes. We can say, hey, we just need to have a volunteer ministry, and it's one of the things that we have to have because that's the way we're going to be able to pull this off week after week, is having volunteer ministry. And so it's just a program. It's just a thing. Instead of saying, hey, let's have a vision behind this. Let's really have purpose behind this and meaning, and let's develop some passion around the why, the purpose for what we're doing. And so I think your vision needs to be clear. And so whether it's you or you're some key church leaders or some key volunteers, you get together and you establish, hey, what is the vision of our volunteer ministry? Not just what is it, but why do we want this thing to grow? Why do we want it to thrive? Why do we want to do this? And just some examples here, you could say, hey, you know what? Because we want to put the love of Jesus in action. And we feel like if our volunteers understand that, that Jesus, what he taught us is that love is a verb, right? And that it's not just about us learning and growing, as great as that is. It's about us demonstrating. It's about us moving on behalf of other people. And so that's why we have a volunteer ministry, is so we want to not just talk about words in the Bible and words on the screen and, songs that we sing. We want to put the love of Jesus in action, and we want to start within the walls of this church with this church family. It could be, we want to move people from spectators to participants. We don't want this just to be a church where people sit and they consume. This isn't a restaurant where people, talk about what they like and don't like on the menu. No, this is a movement. This is a body of people. Everyone has a role, and we want them to participate in that. Maybe your vision could be, we want to be the body of Christ. We don't want to just be a building with walls, a sign, and an address. We want to be the body of Christ, and we're going to demonstrate that through our volunteer ministry. It could simply be a statement to people in your church, is that simply we believe this: when you serve, you grow. And that's why we have a volunteer ministry. That's the vision. That's the why behind what we do. It could be, hey, serving equals following the example Jesus set. Jesus washed his disciples' feet and he said, hey, you go do the same thing. And so here we are wanting to do the same thing, following the example of Jesus, washing each other's feet. And that's why we serve. That's the purpose of our volunteer ministry. And so you want to be clear. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be, rhyme or have alliteration. You just want to be very clear about the why behind your volunteer ministry. And then you want to be confident in it. You want to be sure that all of your key leaders, what that vision is. And when you talk about it, you don't talk about it with hesitancy and you're not timid about it. You just say, hey, we are so excited about our volunteer ministry, and here's why. It's because we believe that when you serve, you grow. Or we believe this is an opportunity for us to put the love of Jesus in action. And you just talk about it confidently. You write it down, you put it in places where you can see it and people can see it. And you just go with complete boldness in the vision that you believe God has for your volunteer ministry. And again, the reason why we start here is because if we want to grow a healthy volunteer ministry, without vision, people perish. Without a vision, it's just another program. It's just another thing that we do. We don't want more programs. We want thriving, healthy volunteer culture, and you got to have vision behind it. Number two is we want to talk about culture. And this is the momentum of the volunteer ministry. This is really how you can begin to build some excitement and some passion and some enthusiasm around what's happening. And I think this starts with communication. Number one, communicating the vision that we just talked about. And also, it's just, listen, people, you want leaders. You want leaders who are engaged. And leaders, if you don't have clear communication, if people don't know where they're supposed to go and when they're supposed to be there, a lot of times what you're going to get are volunteers who just have high empathy. They just really feel sorry for the fact that you don't have enough volunteers. And that's great. High empathy people are great, but you want high leadership people as well. And they want to know, hey, what does this look like? How do I get involved? What are my responsibilities? When do I show up? And I remember volunteering in a children's ministry at my church, and I was just never sure when I was supposed to be there, which Sunday I was there. I was in the preschool. I just walked the babies who were crying. That's what I did. I just walked room to room, found babies that were crying, and I walked them around until they were happy or they fell asleep. And I loved it. But it wasn't clear communication. And after a while, it lost momentum for me. I was just like, I don't even know. I don't know when I'm supposed to be there. I don't know what shirt I'm supposed to wear. I don't know what time. And clear communication helps you engage more leaders. And also communicating to people, hey, this is how many volunteers we need. And again, this is the vision of our volunteer ministry. And then also compassion. Compassion is a big deal because this is really the culture that you want to set for your volunteer ministry is one in which you demonstrate service to the people who serve on behalf of your department. In other words, you are not the top of the funnel, and then your volunteers are below that, and then regular attenders are below that. No, it's flipped. That you are the key servant to your volunteers, and your volunteers are key servants to the people who are there every week. So if you're in a preschool ministry, you serve the preschool volunteers and they serve the moms and dads who drop off their kids every week. If you're in student ministry, you serve the volunteers or the small group leaders in your student ministry, and they in turn serve the students and parents who are a part of that student ministry week after week. It's really about compassion. And it starts with gratitude. Listen, are you treating your current volunteers in a way that could potentially make people who aren't serving jealous? Hey, one of the best ways to grow your volunteer ministry right now is just by showing just unstoppable gratitude for people who are spending time on behalf the vision and mission of your church or your ministry department. I mean, these are people who are busy and they have schedules and families, and they're saying, hey, I'm going to volunteer my time. I'm going to serve on behalf of this church and this department, and that's a big deal. And the more you love on them and celebrate them, the more people in your church are going to look and say, oh, wow, man, everybody is starving for gratitude and appreciation. And if they can, find a place where they get that, man, it's a much more compelling thing than you think. Because again, people just aren't appreciated in our day and age. And if they see that there's a place where they could be, man, that's an attractive pull. Community, creating a place where your volunteers can connect with each other. And for some people, church and sitting and making conversation with people, that's not easy for them. It's not easy for people who aren't, naturally extroverted or very relational to just develop natural community at a church. But when they serve alongside of somebody, man, that's when you just really begin to, unify around a purpose and a vision, get a lot of time. You're talking about common things. And now your volunteers, your servant leaders can create community with each other. And that is so, so, so powerful. And so as a leader, you want to be thinking about ways that you can kind of create a culture where your leaders can connect with each other. Pastoral care. Listen, your servant leaders, your volunteers are going to be going through things. And if you know, hey, I'm serving them, I want to know what's going on in their life. What can I pray for? Someone's going through a tough time, or they're having a hard time with their kid, or their husband or wife is sick. That's pastoral care. It's serving the servant leaders. And then more gratitude. You can never, ever express it enough. So, Haley, can you go live? I'm having trouble with some of my technology here, and just let me know if you see any questions right now that it would be worth us addressing or talking about.
Hey, Ben, absolutely. We've got a couple of good questions here. The first one was, you talked about high leadership. So can you define that a little bit more, and then tell us how you recognize and find those high leadership people?
Yeah, I think the key, this is a great question. High leadership people are high leadership in every area of their lives. So if you see people who they're leaders, either moms who are leaders in their community or with their kids' schools, or men and women in the business world who have leadership roles when it comes to business. People who are coaches, they're leaders with their kids. Little league teams. Leaders are leaders wherever they go. And so you see people who you just know, okay, they are high leaders where they are. A lot of times high leaders are very busy, so it's harder to engage them when it comes to volunteering. And so again, then what you find are people who are high empathy, more, kind of behind the scenes people, which again, those people are great. But going after high leadership people usually involves personal conversations, one-on-one, compelling them to the vision of your ministry area and making a personal invitation for them to get involved in your ministry area. You really have to target them and say, hey, sometimes it's hard because high leadership people, they're opinionated, they have strong personalities, but you don't want to back down from that. You want to love and embrace the idea of having them as people who volunteer in your church or in your ministry area. All right, Haley, anything else?
Yeah, definitely. So you talked about the importance of leaders having vision, but what if all the leaders aren't on board with the same vision?
Well, I think that first off, you have to establish what the vision is and be very clear about it. And, there's just an understanding in the church space and in any area that not everyone is, the vision that you choose is not the same vision that everyone's going to want. Hey, you look at the early church, Paul, Peter, there was disagreements about how to handle certain things. And, what about unbelievers and Gentiles? And there were arguments and people wrestled with that. I think you have to be comfortable with the fact that not everybody would have chosen to go a direction that you would have gone, that you chose to go as a leader. But again, if you're clear on what the vision is and the why behind it, then whether or not people agree, at least they're not uncertain. So, hey, you may not be clear. This may not even be the best vision, but I'm very certain that this is the one we're going with right now. And that way people at least understand and they at least know. And at the end of the day, when you establish a clear vision for a church or for a ministry area, there are going to be people who, they're just not on board. And you have to be comfortable with that. Show them grace and patience, and then understand that some people, that's going to be cause for them to move in a different direction. But the clearer you are, it's going to allow you to engage and empower more people who are on board with that. And sometimes, what my dad used to say, sometimes you just have to move with the movers, All right, let's go one more, Haley.
Yeah, we've got one more here. So what about if you have someone who's a great volunteer, but they might be serving in the wrong area? What do you suggest is a good way to transition them to an area that might be a better fit for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that anytime you transition or want to change with somebody, you present it as an opportunity or even as a need. If you recognize their strengths and then you see where their strengths could fit better in another area, then I think you can paint it from a standpoint of, hey, I would love to ask for your help. Is that we need help in this area, and here are 3 reasons why I see your strength set really being able to fill in this gap that we have. And so I'm so grateful for the time that you've served in the area that you are, but I would love to ask you if we could, get your strengths and get your help in this other area. And you present it as a need that your church or your ministry area has, and you match it up with the skills and strength sets that you see them having. And, again, appreciate them for the time, and then just make a personal invitation for them to transfer their skills and abilities, their strengths over to this other ministry area.
Yeah, and Ben, we've actually got one more, if that's all right. I'm going to throw it to you from Kevin, and he asked, what's a good way to get people involved if they've taken a sabbatical from volunteering? Maybe they were burned out. What's a good way to bring them back in?
Yeah, that's great. And I think it just starts with, a pastoral kind of care conversation, just asking them about the sabbatical, asking them, how are they doing personally, relationally, how are they doing spiritually, how are things going with their family, and just get a gauge for whether you feel like their heart is still, kind of raw or bitter, or if it looks like, hey, they had some time to heal. You can kind of love on them as a person and then make that personal invitation for them to get back in. Listen, it's like going to a party, right? You may not want to show up, but you love being invited. And people are rarely offended by people personally inviting them, asking them to do something, to be involved in something, especially when it's like, hey, man, you're great. We'd love to have you in, serving in this area. I know you went through that sabbatical, but, I would love to invite you to come back if you're ready, when you're ready. And even if they say no, people appreciate being asked because it shows them, hey, they're valued. You really appreciate and see what they do. So, guys, these are great questions. We're going to keep moving, though, for the sake of time. And we're going to go to point number 3, which is looking. This is the multiplication of the volunteer ministry. And it really starts with consistency. And what I mean by that is I think you should move away from the idea that, hey, once a year we're going to have a big worship service where we talk all about serving and we invite people to be volunteers. And instead, I think you say, hey, look, hopefully we're growing. There's going to be some turnover. There's going to be some people, as we've already talked about with these questions, there's going to be some people we need to move to other areas. There's going to be some people that may be dealing with some personal stuff, or maybe their job moves them to another area. People who, are feeling burnout, they need to take a little break. And so you want to always be looking for great servant leaders, always be looking for volunteers. This is, hey, listen, even if, hey, maybe your, ministry area right now, you're like, oh, we have more volunteers than we even know what to do with, which you're probably not on this webinar and we're all jealous of you, right? But if you are, look, you can be looking on behalf of other ministry areas. This is the beauty of a staff coming together around a unified vision for volunteer ministry, is to know that it's not just about me and my silo ministry area, but I'm looking out for people who could be a great fit on the stewardship team, or on the worship service team, or the guest services team, or the children's ministry team. Always be looking. I can't overemphasize that. And then courage. It takes courage to ask people and to invite people to be a servant leader. And there may be people who you've asked before who have declined for some reason, and you're coming back again and saying, hey, I want to follow up. I would love to have you volunteer on our guest services team. And I think some of the great ways that you can think about inviting people is, again, connecting it to vision. Let me tell you why becoming a servant leader in our preschool ministry is such a big deal. Again, think about the difference between that and saying, hey, let me tell you what you do if you're a volunteer in preschool ministry and what time you need to be there. You get to all that later, but when it comes to looking and recruiting, you want to start with the why, start with vision. You want to connect it to people, to life change. Hey, listen, there are parents, new moms and dads who just had their first kid, and now they're coming back to church because they grew up in church and then they were disconnected from the church. They got married, they were still disconnected from the church, and then they had their first child. And guess what they decided to do? Go back to church because they wanted to raise their child in the church like they grew up in the church. So it's their first time back in a while. And this is an incredible opportunity for you to engage these very nervous moms by giving them a place where, man, their child, their baby is safe with you so that they can go engage with God in the worship service. You connect it to people, you connect it to God's movement. Hey, a part of our preschool ministry, what's incredible about that is this is the next generation. These literally are the future leaders of the church. And hey, man, what an incredible opportunity to start with them at this age, demonstrating the love of God, pouring into them, investing in the next generation, the future of the church, the future of God's movement through people in this world, and then connect it to emotions. And just say, hey, you know what's interesting is that you're going to be, in a room with 3-year-olds, they're going to be crawling all over you. And what's going to happen is you're going to grow. You're going to realize that these 3-year-olds are teaching you a lot about your relationship with God. This is all part of the recruiting process, the consistency and the courage and what you connect it to. All right, number 4, training. This is really the molding of the volunteer ministry. And when you have a volunteer training or new volunteer training, make it concise, okay? This is your first impression of what it means to be a servant leader in your church or in your ministry area. So if it's a very long, very dry, very boring meeting, you're going to have people who are already nervous because they're already going to be thinking, oh no, I was already kind of on the fence about if I had enough time to do this. And if this training is any indication of what's required of me, I don't know if I can really do this. So you want to, hey, listen, you want to definitely be clear in your training. You definitely want to empower people and equip them with what they need. But you have to understand too, people are going to learn a lot just from experience and from being around some of your key volunteers who have been there for a while and are doing a great job at it. So you want to start with appreciation. Again, gratitude, more gratitude. Thank them so much for their time. Thank them so much for their willingness to, even consider this. Then connect it to mission and vision. Hey, this is why we have a guest services team. This is why we have a stewardship team as you do this volunteer training. And then you get to protocol. Then you can get to things like, here's the name tags you wear. Here's what we'd like you to avoid doing on social media. Here's, the ministry roles and how often how often you're going to be doing those, what time we get here early, all that kind of stuff, all of the details. But you get to the details third, after appreciation and gratitude and after you cast vision. But again, you keep all of that concise, knowing that people like us, you and I, and church leaders, we've learned more from doing than we have from being trained, just from experience and just from being around other great leaders. And then finally, make it compelling. As you close, just say, hey, this is why what you're doing matters so much. You can share a story. You can talk about, whatever the ministry area is, the worship service team. You can talk about a marriage that was reconciled. You can talk about a family that came back to church and they haven't been to church in a long time. You can talk about, someone who has a special needs child and they've seen, they felt comfortable and safe in your church being connected. You can connect it to stories of life change, or again, you can just go back to the vision and the why and be passionate about that. As bold as you were to communicate vision on the front end to the whole church, and as courageous as you are when it comes to inviting people to serve, be compelling when you train them. Connect it again to God's movement, to heart, and to their lives. So, Haley, let's go back to Q&A. You have a few more questions to throw at me.
Yeah, definitely. So How do you show a lot of value for the volunteers that you have now? How do you thank them for what they're doing and keep them excited to keep coming back and helping?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of ways you can do that. I think one of the just some practical things right out of the gate is writing them thank you notes. Handwritten notes. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can just be a little note that says, thank you so much for your time working with these kids, or, welcoming guests every week. And I don't think we'll ever truly understand the impact that you have, or you may not feel the impact, but just know that it's making a difference, and I appreciate it. I think if you have volunteer meetings, people love being complimented, but they love being complimented in front of other people. And so you could even rotate, some people, or pick a couple of people and just appreciate some things that you've seen them do. Most people are used to being caught doing something wrong. And you want to be a leader who catches people doing something right. And what's rewarded is repeated. So you recognize that, but recognize that where their peers can hear it. People love being complimented when other people are around. Worship service is a great opportunity to have just volunteer appreciation. Social media, if you have leaders that follow you on Facebook or Instagram, you can give some shout outs to people and appreciate them. And I think, if you work in student ministry, have your students write notes to their leaders or volunteers. If you work in guest services, have a couple of people in the church who aren't involved, but just have them write a note to the guest services volunteers. So you can empower the non-volunteers to appreciate the volunteers. These are some simple ways. You get into budgetary things like gifts and buying of gifts and gift cards, or stuff like that, or having a volunteer vision night at your house where you eat dinner together, and then just share stories of how God has impacted you through this. And then again, cast vision as to how much you appreciate them and what you want to see moving forward, the future for your ministry area. There are a lot of ways to appreciate volunteers. My answer to that is just do all of them. All right, Haley, what else?
Yeah, so do you think, in your experience, are your current volunteers at your church, are they the best people to help recruit new volunteers?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. You're like rock star volunteers. They're, they are probably just awesome because they're awesome, but also because they're surrounded by awesome people. And so they have people around them who just contribute to the fact that they are just such great, human beings and great servants. And to go straight to those key volunteers and say, hey, I need your help finding more people who are like you, who are awesome like you are. They're going to be the best advocates for what you're doing. It's in student ministry. We used to tell students, hey, we love going to your schools and we love meeting students, but at the end of the day, you're going to be the best people when it comes to getting more people in our student ministry, because you see them every day, you speak their language, they know you and trust you, and that's an opportunity for you to invite them to student ministry. I think it's similar with volunteers. I think they're going to be the best advocates. They're going to be able to give them the realistic picture for what it's like. And if they're in it and they love it, they're going to speak highly of it. And I think that's a great place to start. All right. Anything else, Haley?
Great. Yeah, we've got one more here. How do you deal with tardiness and no shows with your volunteers? They're just not showing up.
Yeah. Let's say that again. The part about them not showing up. What was the question?
Yeah. So what's the best way to deal with volunteers who maybe are always tardy or they just don't show up at all? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think that a great thing to do is number one, just to have a conversation where you kind of ask them, how's everything going? You're kind of following up with them. You want to address the behavior, not the person, and simply just say, hey, here's what I would love is if, you can be here on, getting here on time. It's a huge value for us. But what I think you'll realize as a church leader is that if you have someone who's creating a lot of problems or they're just simply unengaged, there's typically something beneath the surface. And it takes a little time. You want to be very patient in that conversation. What you may discover is that they're having some, issue with the church. Somebody hurt their feelings, or they're going through something personally. And going into those conversations, I typically know I'm going to come out with a whole different issue than I went in with, as long as I stay patient and you can be slow to get to a point where, again, you address the behavior, not the person. It's not any attack on them. It's not even an attack of any kind. It's just the kind of behavior you would love to see with that role. But then again, this is coupled, after you just kind of follow up, ask them how they're doing. You talk about that. And again, a lot of times other issues are going to come to the surface, and they'll be all over the map as far as what they are. Typically, there's something deeper going on beneath the surface. And this is a great pastoral opportunity because it typically allows you to see it. So, guys, we're going to have an opportunity for Q&A at the end. And again, I'm going to talk through, a number one way that you can kind of get more heart and engagement out of your volunteers right now. You guys have asked some great questions, and I'm going to ask you a question. Would you like help creating a long-term growing volunteer ministry? Because look, this past hour, we've covered a lot, as much as we possibly can within an hour. There's so much more to talk about. There's so many more questions to address, so much more to think about. Even if we had all day, we couldn't cover everything, from recruiting to training to empowering to keeping to looking for more for people who have just been volunteers for so long, and you're starting to worry that it's just kind of white noise for them. I mean, on and on. We could talk about so much. But you and I, and here's what I learned, and it took me a while to learn this the hard way. We need more than just trainings. And I would go to conferences and breakouts and, hear these trainings and thought, oh, that was great. But I needed systems and processes that I could implement immediately. That's what we need when it comes to volunteers. We need, ideas are great, trainings are great. We need systems. We need processes. And so I'm just, so excited today to invite you to be a part of this family of people who are journeying together through something called Volunteer Rocket, which is a step-by-step program to help you. That's you and your church, whatever size it is, gain, train, and retain volunteers with all the how-to coaching, the done-for-you resources, the real church examples, and interviews. And that used to be a pet peeve of mine, that things would be all theory and it would all seem idealistic, instead of saying, I need real church examples. I need people who are in the trenches doing it now, sharing with me what they're learning. That's what Volunteer Rocket is. And I think with Volunteer Rocket, when you jump in today, you're going to be encouraged and really thrilled by how quickly it can improve the volunteer culture of your church. I love what David Taylor says here. I just want to say thank you to your company for putting this together. The material is amazing and exactly what we need. Thank you for letting God use you in this way. It makes an immediate difference. And this has worked for all types of church leaders. So whatever, your personality is, your approach, your style. Churches of all sizes, huge churches have used Volunteer Rocket, and churches that are startup or just starting up, the breakdown, set up, tear down churches in the, elementary school cafeteria, churches that had an overflow of volunteers. There were churches that were just, doing an incredible job when it came to their volunteer area, and they still benefited greatly from Volunteer Rocket, and churches that were struggling to get any volunteers and were just desperate. They found just immediate help from Volunteer Rocket. So if you're wondering what it is, it's delivered in 12 modules, and we deliver those digitally. That's what makes it cost effective. That's what allows you to have and share and keep the information in 12 modules of coaching. They all come with a coaching video, listening guide, an ebook, and then, like we said, practical, real church examples, stuff that's done for you, you can use right away. You can share the information with your team. You can use it with your volunteers or as you recruit. Whether you want to listen, watch, or read, we've made it as easy as possible. Why? Because we've all been there, and we're still there. We're all still volunteers in the local church. So here's what you're going to get, and I'll go through these quickly. We talk about the foundations of a healthy volunteer ministry, how to organize it, like, org charts, all of that stuff, how to attract new volunteers, how to train them without wasting their time, connecting new volunteers so they stick, keeping people from burning out, how to gauge the effectiveness of what you're doing, accelerate your leadership, build a leadership system, how to coach your leaders, drive it, examine it, on and on. And that's a total value of $1,044. But hey, we love rewarding people who act quickly. So you jump in by the end of this webinar. We're going to just give you for completely free the small group system. This is a system for just immediately implementing small group, or you may do Sunday school or some type of discipleship process, how to implement that. There's a small group system overview, leader recruitment path, interview questions, leader trainings. You can use these as well with your volunteers. You can see all of that, $99, and it's free when you sign up by the end of our webinar. So you jump in, you get the entire small group system completely free. Tons of people have jumped in with the Rocket Company with the small group system this year, and they love it. So again, here's what you're going to get. Those 12 modules plus the fast action bonus, all of the stuff that we've talked about with Volunteer Rocket and the small group system. Now, think about this. If all this did was annihilate the anxiety of not having enough volunteers for your key ministry events, would it be worth it? If it took away the vacuum left when the regulars can't show up anymore, would it be worth it? When you have, someone who gets burnt out or moved, or someone who's sick, that's one of your key volunteers, and you're still good to go with all of your volunteer systems, would it be worth it? What about the lonely, I've got to do it all myself complex? And I told you that's what I struggled with when I started in ministry. If it took away that I've got to do it all myself complex, would it be worth it? If it just moved ministry back to a passion instead of a pressure for you, if it moved it away from burnout, just back into love and vision, would it be worth it for you? Listen, here's the truth. Churches with a healthy volunteer base, they grow faster, they have stronger budgets because key volunteers give more, and they develop more leaders. That is just the cold, hard facts. So that being said, hey, you can see, well, it's an incredible deal at this price. This is just to get rid of all of the anxiety, to build servant leadership, develop new staff, a bigger budget, to grow your church in a healthy way. It's an incredible deal. But today, we're going to allow you to get started for $297. That's 70% off when you jump in. And when you jump in, you're going to be able to immediately start using this stuff this Sunday. You're going to start immediately you're going to have access to all 12 modules. You're going to be able to recruit, train, empower volunteers and leaders. 70% off. I don't know that we've ever done anything like this before. We're just doing it for this in-webinar exclusive offer at volunteerrocket.com. Now, I told you that we were going to talk about the one secret to getting more out of your volunteers. And I think it's this: ask for their advice consistently. People feel valued when you ask for their advice. When you show that you value what they think, what they say, what they care, they're just simply more bought in. And you're going to learn a lot about what's working and what's not working from some people who are more in the trenches sometimes than you are as a church leader with the high-end vision that you have. And so asking people for their advice doesn't mean you have to do it every time, but when you ask their advice, you're showing them that you value them and you care what they think, and people are simply going to be more bought in. It's true. Anytime that happens in my life, and when I'm asking my friends advice, they're more bought, they care more about what I'm talking about. So I told you I'd share that at the end. We're going to go to some Q&A, Haley, but then again, I want to, as we do that, I want to show you what all you're getting today. Not just these 12 modules immediately, but the fast action bonus, which is the small group system. This is the value. It's absolutely worth it, and the difference it makes immediately, and 70% off today. 70% off when you jump in. So you can type in volunteerrocket.com, or on your screen, you're going to be able to see a link where you can click on it. It'll take you right there. It'll walk you through the process. It'll make it very simple for you. So click on volunteerrocket.com so that you can immediately see the systems, the process and the steps you need to take to get this system and immediately see a difference when it comes to your volunteer ministry. So I'll leave that up so you guys know that you have about 10 minutes to jump in there and get Volunteer Rocket and the small group system absolutely free, along with that 70% off. While we do that, we're going to jump back in with some Q&A. So Haley, fire away at me. Any other questions that you see?
Yeah, Ben, we've got one final question here, and that's as a church, how do you create a real serve culture with your volunteers? So, in other words, how do you create a culture where your volunteers actually love getting to serve with you?
Yeah, and I think, again, some of the stuff that we mentioned about gratitude, I think that's a very simple, practical way to start. And I think that when you understand that this is not just a role, this is a family within a family, that we are people who care about each other. We pray together. We have times of community building together. I think, maybe a simple way to start would be to have a time once a month, if you have the budget to afford it, where the volunteers in your ministry area, they eat a meal together. Because I think that's just so powerful for them to have that kind of community time together. Maybe something very simple where they have a little bit of fun together, and you start getting outside of it feeling like a job. You check in, you check out, you do some responsibilities, you leave. Moving it to a family is we eat together, we have fun together, we go through hard times together, we know what's happening in each other's lives. And I think that's the mindset, the shift that you want to create in your volunteer culture. If there is somebody in your volunteer ministry, a key leader who's going through a hard time, and you ask them, hey, is it okay if I share this with the other volunteers at a meeting so that we can pray over you? And if they feel comfortable doing that, then you can begin kind of casting that vision as to, hey, this is not a team with roles and responsibilities. This is a family. And as a family, we look out for each other. And, somebody here is going through a hard time, and we're going to pray for him or her. But again, hey, I just so appreciate you guys, and not just what you do on behalf of the mission and vision of this church, but what you do on behalf of each other. So you're casting vision to your group about what it means to look out for and care for each other as volunteers.
Great. And one more here. What's the best frequency for how often you would suggest to have meetings with your volunteers?
Well, that's a great question, and it depends on how long those meetings are going to be and what all you want to use those meetings for. I think if you have short meetings, I would say 10, 12 minutes max, you can meet, weekly or bi-weekly. And we're about to release a guest services system where we walk through that. This is engaging people who are first timers in your church. We talk through a guest services team, a meeting rhythm and agenda, where you go to, again, appreciation up top, or just some encouragement, really, creating some energy around the top of that meeting. And then, appreciating or recognizing, again, a key win, a key story, something that is happening in your church, something that's happening that you saw a key volunteer doing, and then some information that they just need to know. And I think if you're going to do any type of training at that time, you want to keep it very, very short. And people say, well, I can't do it in under 20 minutes. Well, the truth is that if you were only given a 5-minute time slot on like Sunday morning to do it, you would find a way to whittle it down to its most important information. That's what TED Talks are so powerful for. It's 10 minutes, and these people have hours and hours of content, and they're just trying to whittle it down to their best content. And people appreciate meetings that are short and to the point. So I think if you keep your meetings short, you can go with a regular kind of frequency of weekly or every other week. If you feel like, hey, that's not possible, I'm having trouble getting people to show up on time anyway, then you want to probably go to a monthly volunteer meeting and maybe slot out about 30 minutes for it. At this point, you may need to think through childcare and providing childcare for the kids of your key volunteers. It gets more complex, but I think that if you go longer, then I would do it once a month. And if you go shorter, then you can do it weekly or every other week.
Great. And what would you say is a good way to keep a negative personality from impacting the morale of your other volunteers?
Yeah, my answer to that is I don't know. So I hope that's helpful. I think that there are people who are negative about the church because they have an agenda, and there's, somebody hurt their feelings, or they read a book and they don't like that your church doesn't do that. I've seen that. And then there's some people that just kind of have a bend towards a more negative personality, and they don't even necessarily realize it. So I think there's still people that have kind of a negative bend that are great volunteers. You just want to keep them. And I think this is the purpose of your question, is to keep them out of like pulling down the culture. And, maybe there's times where you go like, open discussion type thing, and they just are kind of negative about what's happening. I think if they're in the room, you probably want to avoid more of the, open kind of discussion things. I've seen some great volunteer meetings where it's best practices, but you handpick one or two just key positive volunteers just to share some things that they've learned and some experiences that they have when it comes to being a volunteer. And I think if it gets very toxic, you want to be a shepherd who protects your sheep. And if you're like, literally, this is a virus, so to speak, in the flock, then hey, we've done it before. I haven't asked volunteers to leave, and encouraging them to move towards a different role, or just saying, hey, here's what I've seen, and I think it's time for you to take some time off from volunteering. But you don't want this to be the first conversation, because people don't want to get caught off guard and say, I didn't even realize I was negative, and I didn't even realize it was affecting the group. So you got to have some hard conversations, and that's just part of ministry leadership, is having hard conversations with volunteers and saying, hey, here's what I've noticed. And again, it's the behavior, it's not the person. Is everything okay? Is there anything we need to talk about? Here's what I love. Here's what I think we would need. So you have a one-on-one conversation. You see how it goes. You gauge it. And if it seems like it really is not getting better and it really is affecting your group, then you have to ask somebody to step aside from being a volunteer, which is not fun for anybody, but I've been there.
Great. Well, at what point, Ben, would you say that someone who's a really, really good volunteer, at what point would you ever move them to a paid staff member position?
Yeah, another great question. Y'all are asking all kinds of great questions today. Before I answer that, I just want to, again, be clear that today, this $1,200 value Volunteer Rocket in the small group system is 70% off. You can see that on the screen, hopefully, at volunteerrocket.com. So go to volunteerrocket.com. You can either type it in a separate tab, or there should be a place for you to click on and go straight to Volunteer Rocket, and that will walk you through very simply how to access all 12 of those modules and all 13 of those documents that come with the small group system. All the stuff you need to get moving immediately, make a difference today. So don't just hear it and say, oh, these are good ideas, and then fall back into old habits. That's one choice. The other choice is to say, hey, we really care about this, so we're going to make some drastic changes, and it's going to start today with Volunteer Rocket and the small group system. $297, volunteerrocket.com. You can jump in. So the question is, moving a key core volunteer to a staff position. It's if you have the budget, and it's the moment that you have the budget, or that you see that they're ready. I think internal hiring, almost, not always, I don't want to overstate here, but in my experience, just works better than outside hiring. And there's great outside hiring that happens. I'm not questioning any of that. But people who are key volunteers, number one, you've already seen that they have a servant heart, what an incredible start for a staff position. Number two, they understand your church and the ins and outs. They understand the behind the scenes, that it's not all perfect. It's not all roses here. That, it's not, church staff is not a bunch of perfect human beings who do everything perfectly. We're real people who just care about people. And they have been impressive to you in the sense that you're even asking this question. When you can pull the trigger, pull the trigger. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. You call me and we'll talk about it, and I'll apologize profusely. But to me, I love the idea of going that direction on staff hires anytime that I can. Because of all the reasons that I just stated. So I say go for it. It's a great question. So Haley, it's 3:00. Again, we said we wanted to be respectful of you guys' time. So we're going to wrap it up here. I think that we are going to either do a replay or we will do another webinar with the same content because I know we had a little trouble with the screen sharing up top. And, we want to make sure we give you guys good quality experiences. So we'll do one of those two things. Again, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all the great questions. I appreciate the way that you're caring about volunteers in your church. And volunteerrocket.com, you guys have a few more minutes to jump in and a few more minutes to get in there and get access to that at 70% off. And just look for more trainings like this. We do them completely for free that are coming up in the future because we just want to help you guys in every way we can. Small churches, limited staff, we understand, man, the need to move your vision and the people that it takes to make that happen. So we love you guys. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll see you at our next webinar. Thanks, guys.